Okay, we're going to take a look at Citadel of Blood, the game that convinced me that I did not want to buy Death Maze, which is the same system. This was an Ares magazine game that, I mean, almost all of them were within my subscription. I missed the first couple, but, I've played it a few times. I never liked it. It always felt rather like solo D&D dungeon generator type thing that was in the AD&D books, but less good somehow. I mean, the thing with D&D is all the complexity of the rules of D&D you have to know to be able to play D&D. So like sitting down and playing a random solo generator, all you have to worry about is the random solo generator and the rest of it. Here you've got a whole set of rules for exploring the dungeon, as well as a combat system of some sort or another. So why is this on the list? Why am I doing this now? Well, I made the mistake of going to my request list and looking at the ones that have the highest numbers that, I update every few years, but not very often. And this was one of the few things on it that was neither massive nor had a heavy rule overhead, whatever. So I was kind of, was kind of looking for a Euro or something, but I'm like, fine, I'll do this. And I bring it up. And it's something that I already knew or had already played. I think my past wife gave this a shot. Pretty sure, yeah, I don't think my first wife and I played it at all. But again, I kind of gave her the, okay, here's the game, go and play it by yourself. Because I really didn't like it, but she was kind of excited by it. And she may have played it a couple of times. I don't know what she rated it, not very well, I'm sure. It's not that good a game. It's also, if I recall correctly, it's a hard game without a lot of payoff. Hard in terms of like, you will probably fail. And failure's not much fun. Easy success is not much fun either. There's sort of a balance that solo designs have to reach. I tend to be more in favor of them being easier. And there's nothing in game to allow you to configure it. So what do you got? Well, the dungeon is composed of all these shits that have two sides to them. One is corridors, and the other is rooms. And they're distinguished, if they've got kind of a little notch coming out, that's a doorway. And you're going to have to deal with special aspects of that. Uh-oh, somebody slipped in here. Okay. The characters, okay. There are named characters, a whole bunch of them. I don't know that they really need to make a counter for each named character in the game. You're basically, when you create a party, you get 3 of their named heroes, who are ones that show up, at least quite a few of them, in Swords and Sorcery. It's the same world. Also the same world as, trying to remember what it's called, Dragon Quest, I think. Dragon Hunt is the Avalon Hill thing. Anyway, it was a role-playing system that SPI folks developed. I think they were playing D&D in that world before they started changing things, but like there are ideas to that world that probably evolved as part of their game world. Stuff like three different suns. It's in a trinary system, and three different colors of magic, and all kind of weird stuff. Some of it, this game feels relatively serious, although Kronks are kind of, but they're not as bad as ducks. But Swords and Sorcery is kind of goofy with killer penguins and stuff like that in it that are just, and T-Rexes and all kind of weird shit going on in it that doesn't feel like your common fantasy. Anyway, this is from that same role-playing universe, which I think is one that they were playing, and maybe they were testing out and developing Dragon Quest from the beginning, before this, came about, and then eventually decided to put, their own design to the play. So yeah, you've got little markers for all the different characters in the game. These could have been done with generic markers where, just like you use, so 3 of your characters are going to be from these heroes, and 3 are more generics that you generate yourself. And whatever, I don't think they needed to print all these counters. Had they done less character counters, they could have put a bigger flow of monsters in, which would have been probably advantageous. I'm not sure. You start the game going through, I don't remember what this thing is called, the Gate of Evil or something like that, and you're looking for the Hell Gate. And you're going to be exploring the dungeon, looking for that Hell Gate, and eventually the mechanisms of the game allow you to find it. But on your way, you run into a bunch of random monsters, you pick up treasure, you're allowed to leave the dungeon in order to recuperate, and then you'll show up on a random day, not necessarily the best day for the party to be going there. You don't get to choose what sun is dominant or anything like that. It's always random, and you can re-engage with the dungeon to try to find more. One reason you'd leave, well, one is to heal and to regain your spells and everything. Like D&D, there's a limit to how many, well, actually, there's not that much. The spell system actually works off of your hit points. So, GURPS kind of did this too, where casting a spell has a physical cost. The combat system is very abstracted. You're not, running minis around on a map or anything. What you're doing is you set up a little mini battle type thing of a couple of lines of three figures each, and they fight each other. And I remember it being relatively bloody for the characters, and it would be hard for you to win the campaign. Well, it would be hard to win on one dungeon exploration. And if you come back out and you heal up, it might still be hard depending on whether or not you're playing multiple sessions. If you're playing, if you keep diving into the dungeon in the same session, you keep the structure of the dungeon, and you're only going to face the wandering monsters, not the random monsters that you'd find in rooms. In addition, the monsters might have treasure. You can negotiate with them. You can bribe them. You can. There are features in some rooms which involve rolling on different tables. If you investigate them, good and bad effects can come from them. You can get magic weapons, you can get potions, all kind of stuff like that. Your eventual goal is to reach this Hell Gate, at which point you'll be facing a squad of demons the Evil Magician X the Unknown, and the Hellgate itself, which is this little thing here, which will be lashing out at you every turn. So it's going to be a particularly hard fight. Now, the other reason that you'd leave, other than just healing up and being able to go back in and maybe have an easier time reaching wherever your destination may end up being, which might hit you right away, and that's probably pretty good, except, I don't know. Presumably, a full-strength party can beat that squad of demons and X the Unknown and the Hellgate. If not, well, the game is just badly broken, because the only way you can succeed then is by leveling up. And leveling up is hard. So you go into the dungeon, you get your collection of loot and whatever, you come back out, and not only do you heal up, but you can expend experience points to increase some of your skills and whatnot, which might be of some importance. The monsters are double-sided, and it's kind of problematic. I've got them sorted by their front side, but finding the back sides is going to be hard. All right. I guess we'll take a look at the rules. This is done in... So, Ares always, I think, did this, where they have kind of this bold text inside. The normal case numbers that an SPI game generally used, but they've got kind of like this bold text, I guess, to make it friendlier to role-playing type gamers. They were trying to attract, the broader adventure gaming hobby, as they put it, which would include the RPGs, etc. I'm gonna take a little break so I can light my pipe and get my tea positioned and everything, and we'll start hunting through the rules. But that's kind of the brief overview. It's just a dungeon crawl. There's not a hell of a lot in it. You fight combat, and there's not a lot of exciting stuff. And from what I could tell, Death Maze wasn't much more than this. Maybe it was just a different scenario, But everything that I could see about it, it was like, yeah, do I really want to buy another copy of this, essentially, that may be a little different? And I never liked this enough to think about it. Yeah, every so often I'll see it, on BGG's Marketplace or whatever, and I thought about it, and I'm like, I don't want to buy it. It's not well rated or whatever. I did end up buying one of their science fiction-y type things. That's not well rated. World Killer. I don't know where the hell I've got that kicking around, somewhere down here probably. Oh, there it is. There it is. Someday I'll get to that as well. Wow, I'll try to blind you. All right. Really, like I probably indicated, not all that thrilled with this. The reason, so the thing is, the games on my request list, when that first came out, a bunch of people recorded, gave a thumbs up or whatever to the games they wanted to see. So all the stuff of my original games and my earliest purchases ended up on there with fairly high ratings or fairly high thumb counts, whereas newer stuff shows up and, I don't know, maybe a half dozen thumbs is sort of the max of anything that comes out now, because I think people are not really subscribed to it, and so they don't get to see the new entries and thumb them. I think very few are subscribed to it, and I don't know. It's just it's not gathering. So anything that I obtain, even older games that I obtain, are especially problematic. Obviously, things like Euros and stuff. That's not the demographic that I'm mainly catering to, it seems. But also, even when I buy, when I get some of the newer games that I pick up recently or whatever, they don't end up on there the way they used to. And yeah, so like, there's things like this that maybe people have a fond memory of or were curious about or whatever, and a bunch of people thumbed it, and so it had like 40 thumbs on it or whatever, which is kind of my cutoff point. And so I went ahead with it. Okay. So we ought to look at the monsters, what their values are on them. They have a combat bonus on them, and whether or not they have a weapon. And then a number of dice of wounds that they're going to have. This is expressed in D6. Sometimes it'll say D3. It'll be like 1D3. Yeah. They have the name of the monster. Nothing else too exciting. Some of them are going to have spells. Let me see. X has a weapon. These guys can cast spells, and I think they just cast a single spell continuously. All right. The first exciting thing is you have to actually create your party. And you're going to grab, like I said, 3 random heroes from the named heroes. So instead of creating some kind of chart or something that you roll on, you just throw them all in a cup and you pull 3 of them. That's going to be the basis of your party. And those, I think, are going to be stronger than your future characters. But then you're allowed to pick 3 initiates. And you choose a race, elf, dwarf, or human for an initiate. And then you get initial stats just written down. Just these bonuses. And so, like, if you don't have negotiation skill or D-trap skill or Hellgate skill, you're going to want to make sure that you fill that in because each of them is of some value in the game. I don't really remember how Hellgate works, but it has something to do with trying to end the game. You choose a primary and secondary weapon for each of your initiates and enter them under weapons. Presumably, you're going to take your bonus weapon. You roll on the magic potential table for each initiate. So it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, look, I'm going to create a character. And then you roll over here, and you will see whether they're a magician or not. And it's just a bonus addition to everything else they can do. You don't have any kind of choice in this. You could get lucky. You could end up with no mages out of your initials. Then you choose spells, and you're allowed to choose a number of spells equal to the highest magic rating that you have. So, that you have available to you. So, with an initiate, your highest magic rating is going to be either 0, 1, or 2. But with some of these other characters, we have fair amounts of magic points, like Dalmilandril has up to 5. Got another one here, a dwarf with 5. And you can also see these guys have higher skills, higher weapon skills. They're going to have, what else here? Better wound points, etc. So they're going to be more powerful characters. And a lot of those characters do show up in Swords and Sorcery, which is a much later acquisition for me, a game that I played a couple of times at most. I don't know if I played this that much more, but I've had this much longer. Okay, and then you're allowed to increase your wound points by 1, or a skill with a weapon by 1, or increase your skill by 1. Now, if you don't have one of these skills with one of the main characters, you almost certainly want to focus on that. Although combat abilities are pretty important too. Then before you enter the Citadel, well, really at all times before you enter combat, you have a march order, which is going to be indicated. The character counters are placed on the table in march order. It's a number of rows of characters with no more than 3 characters per row. You create the rows by mutual agreement. The first row contains at least 2 characters, unless there's only 1 character in the party. At the beginning, you start with 6. You could start with less characters. You're not allowed to start with more. And then you roll a die to randomly see which son you have. And that will determine the magic points that each player has. It doesn't have any other effect. Like, it would feel to me like, and I don't remember if Dragon Quest did this. I don't think so. I wonder if I have my copy up here. But it would feel to me like the amount, like the different sons would enable different kinds of magic. Or empower it greater, but instead it's just like this, hey, which one do you have an affinity for? You know, which do you want to be there? Anyway, you're going to have the magic potential for that particular son, and whatever your magic potential is, that's the number of spells that you know. So you're allowed to pick the maximum number of spells you could know, the number of that, but then you actually can only choose to bring into the dungeon whatever number applies to that current predominant son. And then you're going to put, that's the party. You're going to put the, what is it, the Gateway of Evil, that's what it's called. We got the Hell Gate and the Gateway of Evil. They go in, start on the Gateway of Evil, and then when you enter the first thing, you'll be moving into a corridor, which means you use this side, and then you just place it however you like, as long as it's legal. There are some rules to prevent you from to allow the dungeon to be built correctly, essentially. So you pick which room or corridor you're going to go in, you pick a segment check, and then you place it. And then, I'm going to need to swap batteries anyway. If you're entering a room, you have to make a roll to see if the door is trapped, and then there's a 1 in 6 chance, then you have to check your D-trap skill to see if you can do it, and otherwise it's sprung, and there'll be a table that you roll on to see what the trap is, and you're going to be constantly paging through these last 3 pages of the rule book. So here's the trap table, and you can get multiple traps, and they just do bad things to you. Party counter moves into the room. You roll a die to see if there's a monster there. If it's a room, there's a 50-50 chance there's a monster there. If it's a corridor, or it's a room that you've already entered before, you only have a 1 in 6 chance of a monster being there. Then you have options to negotiate or bribe the monster. And if those don't work, or you don't want to, you fight. The party gets first swing, which allows them to perhaps wipe out a lot of the monsters. Then the monsters, then the Hellgate if it happens, and then both the party and the monsters have to rearrange their fighting order. If you kill all the monsters, you get to check for treasure and grab what you get and split it up as you like, and you get experience points for everyone who's alive. Then you can look at the feature that's on the thing, and you'll basically you choose a character to investigate, you roll on the table to see what they find out, and then you apply any results on the specific tables. Like I said, I'm not going to go too deep into some of this, but segments are placed so that everything lines up and fits. And if it can't be placed correctly, then you keep drawing until you get a chit that can be placed. Now, what it tells you is throw the counter back in the cup and draw again. That doesn't make any sense. That counter doesn't work for what you're trying to do. So hold that counter out and draw again, and eventually put them all back in the cup. The party gets to choose how the segment works. You can't create a dead end. If there's going to be a dead end in the entire Citadel, you have to keep drawing. There has to be a way forward. And at the beginning, you only have one entrance, so very quickly you could end up in an ugly situation, depending on what the corridor structure is or whatever. So you're going to avoid that. The Citadel can go up to 3 levels in depth. There are staircases. There's a mechanism that makes them work. And we'll get to that, maybe, I don't know. Moving from one level to the next counts as entering a room segment. Okay, there's a level chart. You don't want to be on deeper levels, but you may find you have to. The level chart is here. That's going to improve the monsters, but it also might increase the experience and improve the treasure that you find. The biggie, though, is that it multiplies the number of monsters. It makes the monsters tougher. So you really don't want to be in the deeper levels if you can help it. And there's nothing that guarantees that the Hell Gate is going to be all 3 levels down. It could be on that first level. You won't find it too quickly, but all right. Oh, we got the monster multipliers here. If you bypass a monster, its counter is left on the maze to indicate its position. Now, this is a little weird because elsewhere it says something about writing these down instead of leaving them on the map, which is a little contradictory. But the thing is, there are way too many Kronks and Orcs and stuff like that. The problem is there may not be a big enough counter mix to be leaving lots of monsters behind. And basically, let me go through the basic mechanisms. I'm not going to go into all the details of the different types of traps, for example. But you have to check for a trap. If there is a trap, you can try to detrap it. You send the delegated character. They roll a die. If they roll less than or equal to their detrap rating, the trap is detrapped. And the trap will automatically spring against a character who does not have detrap skill. And it does bad things. All right, monsters. Okay, when you encounter a monster, you roll to find out what the monster is. Using, there's a cross-reference table. There's, for example, room monsters. There's the wandering monsters to find what type that you have and how many. You can negotiate with any monster except for demons and X the unknown. The negotiation is listed on the monster characteristics chart and is used regardless of the number of monsters being negotiated with. The member of the party rolls 2 dice and subtracts the monster's negotiation from the roll, and they can modify it by their negotiation skill. There are also spells that can be used, and then you look on the negotiation table for the result. And if you get agreement, the monster will leave you alone and ignore you, and you can investigate the room or whatever. If you get intimidate, I think the monster is intimidated and will leave the party alone, And those that have treasure will give a quarter of their gold marks to the party to avoid being killed. The party may still attack them if they want the rest of the monster's treasure. Generally, it's not a good idea to beat up on monsters. It's just going to weaken your party, although the treasure might be valuable. If you don't succeed in negotiating, you can bribe. And again, you can't bribe demons in X. You cross-index the sum of You cross-index the sum of wound points and negotiation value of the strongest monster in the group versus an amount of gold marks offered by the party. The indicated number is the number the party must roll equal to or less than to bribe the monsters. The success will be an agreement where they just that'll be here. An agreement where they just agree to leave you alone. They will not be intimidated by your bribe. For combat itself, God, I don't want to do this. I mean, normally I set a game up, so I would have had all the characters and everything already picked. I figured I'd dive into the roles, because maybe it would motivate me a little bit more. But we got to get this one done, right? We got to get everything on that list done, or else expire. One of those two, whichever comes first. Okay. The 3 highest wound point monsters will be in the front row. The remaining monsters will be in the second or third row. The players choose which monster is deployed in front of each character within those limits. If there's only one monster, it goes in the middle. If there's 2, you space them out in spaces 1 and 3. Each member of the party in the front row can attack a monster in the monster's front row. Party members in the second row can fire bows, throw daggers, and cast spells, and results are applied immediately. Then the monsters swing back. Their attacks can be melee or spell attacks, thus evil magicians may cast spells from the first row, unlike party magicians. Monsters in the second row can only fire bows or cast spells if they have them. And finally, if you're with the Hellgate, it gets to do 3 blast spells, even from the third rank, which normally you wouldn't be able to fight from. A player can then move one character from the front row of the party's march order to another row. However, at the end of this movement, no row can contain more than 3 characters. Then the monsters must rearrange so that 3 monsters occupy the first row. One monster must be moved forward to fill the space in the march order closest to the character march order. And the completion of these steps is a round. You go back around and do more. When there are 3 characters facing each other, you must attack directly opposite. And then it goes into more. Now, when there are less than 3 characters or monsters in one or both of the march order, each must attack the enemy in its front unless there is more than one enemy at an equal distance from the attacking unit. Targets attacked by a monster will be done randomly. And characters can attack only during party combat. Monsters attack only during monster combat. Each attacks once per character phase. You can never attack more than one enemy. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. To resolve an attack, you refer to the combat results table. Roll a die, and you determine the number of wound points you inflict on the target. Okay, the combat results table is all the way on the back here. So, well, one die is not going to get you very far. given that it goes up to 17 or more. What's up with this? The die roll is modified by weapon skill and combat bonus. These modifiers are totaled and added. The hero Almeric is attacking. The die roll is 4, and this is added to his weapon skill of 2. +2 sword. So he gets a combat bonus of 3, and he has a combat bonus of 3. So he gets a total of 9. Throwing daggers can be thrown once per combat and then retrieved after combat is over. Bows can fire any number of times during combat, but only once per friendly combat phase, and only from the second row. Unarmed monsters use the monster table. Here. Armed ones, I don't know what armed ones use. Monsters that have weapons, the weapon carried is found on the monster characteristic chart. Okay. The combat bonus of a monster is added to the die roll. As a result of combat, the monster or character that is attacked can suffer damage. The number of wound points incurred. Each time a character monster suffers damage, the number of additional wounds it may absorb is reduced. Reductions in wound point totals are recorded on the character record for characters or scrap of paper for monsters. When they've suffered a number of wounds equal to or greater than their wound point total, they're dead. If you take losses, you may have to, you may need to reorganize. We get the instructions on reorganization here. And I'm pausing because I'm just sick of this. I know, it doesn't sound that complicated or anything. It really isn't. It's just, I'm not looking forward to it. Let's struggle to get through this before, I got about an hour until it's time to go play Raid. It's funny, I forced myself to be awake. Like, it's gotten cool, and it's hitting like 70 degrees or close to it, supposedly. But that's at the airport. Up here, it's just cooler. That cool weather makes me want to sleep, or curl up under blankets at least. And one bright thing, if you've been following the travails of my existence, is that my light bulbs came, which means I can play things up here at night again. It doesn't directly affect the lights here. They're just as screwed as they were. But downstairs in the living room, and that leads to my staircase up here. Only 3 of the 4 actually worked. I'm going to write that off as good enough to last, hopefully, longer than I do. All right, so the next thing is magic. What's a fantasy RPG without some magic in it? Characters can cast their spells during various times in the game. You can cast each spell any number of times, as long as you can take the wounds from it. That's not entirely true. Some spells have limitations to them beyond this. When you cast a spell during combat, you may not make a weapon attack. You can only cast spells during combat if you're in the second row. Combat spells can be cast by characters and by charmed monsters in the second row of the march order only, and by monsters in the first or second row. All right. When you cast a spell, you take wound points equal to the spell's cost. Each time you cast a spell, this varies with the spells. Now, some of the spells can be resisted, and if successfully resisted, they have no effect on the target. They still cost you the mana or the health. I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of them is Charm, which can be cast against monsters. They make a resistance check, and if you succeed in charming a monster, it joins your party and fights with you. And the players will get experience for anything that it kills. You don't get experience for it. Sleep allows you to knock a monster out of a battle. There's combat spells which affect, most of them are cast at individual monsters, but there's like explosion that causes everybody to make a resistance check and possibly take a wound. It doesn't sound very wise. It's not a very efficient spell. Redemption allows you to uncharm something. Magic Shield makes you immune to spells. Hesitate gives the party time to heal themselves just before a combat begins. Ceasefire is like a negotiation success, an agreement, but it's 3 wounds. Mental Attack is 4 wounds, does a lot of damage. There's some non-combat spells. Lock allows you to lock a door shut. Instead of negotiating, bribing, or fighting a monster, you can use this spell to lock the door after leaving. Once locked, the door may never be reopened. If the room is entered again from a different entrance, the same monster will still be there. And here's where it says, players may wish to note the locations of the monsters on a piece of paper. Elsewhere, you were supposed to leave them on the map. So I don't know what the intention is here. Like, it's, 2 ways of handling things that contradict. Mage Armor creates a number of extra essential hit points that you have. But they don't protect you against casting spells, like if you hurt yourself. Neutralize Poison sounds like a good idea to have. Stone to Flesh. If you fight a Medusa and get turned to stone, you're going to need to do this to fix yourself. I don't know if you're allowed to carry the statue out. Strength. This is the same as a strength potion. I don't know what the hell that means. You wish they'd give you, because you have a choice with spells, you don't have a choice with the potions. So a strength potion increases combat bonus by a d6 for the next entire combat sequence. Teleport. You can be teleported to a segment of the maze caster's choice, which the party has already entered. It doesn't sound terribly useful. You can't use it against X, demons, or the Hellgate. I guess if you want to get somebody out who's really hurt. Healing. Okay, this costs only 1 wound, and it allows you to cure a D3 plus 1 wounds immediately. Can't cast it on yourself, so you need 2 healers in the party. However, before you can cast this, before you enter the Citadel, you roll a d6 to determine how many times you're allowed to cast this. Rejuvenate works the same as heal, but it recovers a d6 plus 1 wounds. Not as effective for a cost of 2, but you probably need both. Thief, your D-trap skill is increased by 3 for a given D-trap, but you have to have had some to begin with. There's negotiation skills. Oratory adds 4. Cow creates an automatic intimidated, but it can be resisted. Daunt is more expensive, but the monster hands over all its treasure. And Sway reduces the bribery table. Cajole, a bigger reduction on the bribery table. Great. There's 2 spells that you can only get by exploring the dungeon. Wrath of God, which is a pretty nice attack at a cost of 3 for 2d6 plus 2 wounds. The other attacks are all pretty much equivalent. So like Blast costs 1 and causes 2 wounds. Lightning costs 2, causes a D3 plus 2 wounds. Mental attack costs a whole of 4 and causes 2d6 plus 2 wounds. That's a massive hit, which is really useful, but you don't want to waste it on little monsters. Now you're only going to have a few of these spells. I think these ones that you obtain from the game, you can have in addition to your other spells. Kind of weird. Wrath of God, like I said, big damage. Resurrection, yeah, it brings back a character with all the wound points they had before the party entered. This costs 5. And it looks to me like it does not have any restrictions like the healing spells do. Which means if you can find that spell, you're going to be in powerful shape. You get that out of a bookcase. The Wrath of God comes from Malthus or manuscripts on the feature table. Resistance checks. Each character or monster has a resistance value. When a check is necessary, you roll a die. If you get less than or equal to that value, the character has passed and is probably not affected by a spell. Experience. You get experience by killing monsters. These points are listed on each monster characteristic, I believe. Maybe not. I thought they were listed there. Let's see how much it is. Total the number of wound points the monsters had before the combat and multiply this number by 6. And then you divide it by the number of characters who are still alive. And that's how many you get. A running total of experience points. At the end of the game, the experience points and treasure are compared to determine the winner. If a campaign is being played, points are spent to increase abilities. Charmed monsters don't gain experience, but the players get them. At the end of the game, you can spend 100 experience and 100 gold marks to increase an ability by 1 point. Room features. Each of these is explored by rolling on a table and checking stuff. Some of them are dangerous, some of them are good. There's nothing where you definitely have a good feature. Everything has some danger to it. Mirrors are a special feature. The first time you run into a mirror, you roll a die to determine which level of the dungeon the Hellgate is on. And it's most likely to be on level 3, but you could get lucky. Once you're on the correct level, and that might be on the first one, then you make a second roll to determine how many unexplored segments you have to enter before the Hellgate is discovered. And that just becomes a timer ticking down. Eventually you will find the Hellgate. Well, you will find the Hellgate X number of entries after that. Treasure itself. You check the monster type killed with the treasure column on the chart. This yields a letter or 2 letters with a slash. A single letter is the treasure type of that monster. If there are 2 letters, the first is the treasure type if you find him in a room. The second is if he is wandering about. We have letters there. We should have a treasure table or something, right? You would think. Here we go. And that could create magic items. That could create money and jewels. You cross-index the monster's treasure type with the 3 columns. Under each column will be a number followed by a colon followed by a die roll. For example, 3:1 d6 times 5. For each column, roll a d6. If the number rolled is less than or equal to the number before the column, then you roll the die again and you get what's listed there. Refer to the jewel table. If jewels are found, you roll 2d6 for each jewel. The resulting number determines the gold mark's value of the jewel. The value is entered into the character record of the owning character. The magic table for magic items found. Roll a d6 for each magic item. The resulting number is located on the table. To determine the type of magic item, the second roll is made for each item, blah, blah, blah. Gold marks are divided evenly among party members. Treasure types J, K, and L will always be in chests, which may be trapped. The chest is trapped on a 1 through 3. You'd have to do a D trap to get through it. And that'll give you free access. And you might have weapons, armor, potions, potions are fucked up here. When you find a potion, you have to drink half of it. And it immediately affects you, and it might be bad, it might be good, whatever. And then you have one more use of it. There is something that allows you to detect what potions are. There's talismans, which you get to wear, and they help they improve abilities and magic abilities mainly. There's medallions, which give you special abilities, like you might be immune to poison. This is where the potion appraisal is. There's ones that increase stats. There's a strangling. I think there's always a bad effect. There's not cursed weapons and armor, but there's always a bad effect to these other things. Rings are okay too, but the medallions, talismans, and potions are all dangerous. Some of the monsters have special abilities. We will talk about them in a little bit, but I have to swap batteries. I don't know if these are noted. I think they are. Yeah, there's a notes thing that lists them over there. Kronks. Kronks stink. When you fight Kronks, each party member has to make a resistance check. If you fail, you're sickened and your combat bonus is reduced by 2. Now, they're relatively weak critters. This will only last for the combat. The Chimera. When it attacks a character, he will breathe flames at the character in addition to attacking. Character takes a resistance check, and if he fails, he takes an additional wound from the flames. A Medusa. Each time a Medusa attacks, roll a d6. If a 6 is rolled, the Medusa has turned the character to stone. Remove the counter from the party's march order. At the end of the combat, a character who knows the spell Stone to Flesh may revive the character. If there's no character who knows the spell, the affected character is dead. Yeah, you can't carry the statue back. At the end of every third monster combat phase after you're first wounded, a troll regenerates a wound point. He won't regain heavier. A vampire will attempt to charm a character he's attacking during the first 2 monster combat phases. This works like a charm. It has a resistance, etc. If the vampire dies, it's recovered. There's also the redemption spell. Each wound point inflicted on a Hydra increases its combat bonus by 1 point. This increase takes place immediately. Now, Hydras are probably pretty tough, size-wise. Yeah. Let's see. RV is resistance, NV is negotiation. That doesn't really matter. I'm not, it's going to be on the counter itself. Yeah. All right. Evil mages, including X the Unknown, know 1 spell, Lightning, which they will cast every combat round, and it will not, they will cast it every round unless doing so would cause the mage to die. The Hellgate is a large device which the power must find and destroy. It is guarded by a number of bound demons and X the Unknown. Once the Hellgate is found, there will be an extra phase in the combat sequence for the Hellgate phase where it gets to attack. Once it's found, you roll a d3 plus 2 to see how many demons are guarding it with no level modification. The monster march order is set up with the demons in the first and second rows, X in the second, and the Hellgate in the third. During the Hellgate phase, the Hellgate casts 3 blast spells at a character. It does not expend wound points to to cast spells. The Hellgate will continue to cast spells as long as X is alive. When he dies, the Hellgate ceases to function and the demons disappear. The Hellgate can cast spells from the third row. To destroy it, X must be killed, and then a character with a Hellgate rating must attempt to destroy it. He rolls a die, and the result is less than or equal to the Hellgate rating. The Hellgate is destroyed. If it's higher, he suffers a wound. This die is rolled separately for each character attempting to destroy the Hellgate. You can continue to roll until you succeed, dies, or gives up. Demons and X the Unknown are only affected by the monster wound, monster combat bonus, treasure type, and experience point rows of the level chart. The number of monsters in negotiation rows are not used. Your Hellgate rating may not go above 5. Okay, so there's two types of victory in this game. Team victory and character victory. Team victory is you destroy the Hellgate. May take more than one game for the party to win, or die. In order for a character to win, he must get out of the Citadel alive, have gained at least 100 experience points, and gained 100 gold marks in gold or jewels. If more than one character fulfills these, then the character with the greatest total amount of experience points, jewels, and gold marks is the winner. So here's the fucked up thing. Experience points are divided evenly. Gold marks are divided evenly. Jewels, I think, like magic items, are handed out. You know, the party just decides how to divide them up. So the only thing that determines whether you win over your other players, unless you get to steal something, like there might be a case where you get to grab something and nobody else does. So in general, whoever takes the most jewels as like picks in whatever negotiation happens with that. And there's not really a description of how to divide stuff up. This is bullshit, right? Like, if more than one character fulfill, ties are possible. Yeah, they're necessary. The party, in a given game, if the party may decide to leave the Citadel before the Hellgate is found and destroyed, in this case, victory is impossible. Team victory is impossible. In order to exit the Citadel and thus the game, the party must go back to the first level and exit. And the gold marks and jewels acquired by characters in a previous game are left at home when you enter the Citadel. So if you survive, you can expend them as partial payment towards acquiring new abilities. If you die, the money is lost. Experience points are handled the same way. So it really doesn't matter if you carry. Oh, no, you can't carry it with you because then they could be divided up among the other people. A charmed monster in one game will wander off before the party enters the Citadel. If you exit the Citadel without destroying the Hellgate, you can add characters in the party to bring the total back up to 6. It is up to the players to decide whether the new characters will be heroes or initiate, but an equal balance of both must be maintained, or should be maintained. Previously killed characters are ineligible to re-enter. Before re-entering the Citadel, a character can choose new weapons. 6 months of time is assumed to elapse, which means the XP needed to increase a character's ability increases by 10% after the third time they've exited the Citadel. It increases by 10% each time thereafter. Thus, characters effectively age. I really don't know if that's necessary to be in there. It feels like, you know. Look, if you keep going in and failing. All right. Anyway, that's what we're going to see. It's, you know, it's got an interesting backstory and everything. The monster counters are somewhat unappealing. Like, you know, I feel like I should have something like Titan counters or something in this game. It just should be much, much more heavily produced. Obviously, it was an Ares game. But from what I understand, Death Maze is no better. Like, I don't know. I just would like something a lot bigger and prettier for this. Obviously, the artwork on them, it's SPI stuff. It's not going to be fantastic, but they're nice matte counters. And we shall probably not start until sometime tomorrow morning or whatever. I just don't have the will. I've got to make a party, write down all kinds of stuff on a sheet of paper. That sounds like a lot of work. All right, let's send this up. This gives you at least an idea of what we're doing.